monsoon season was particularly dangerous because of the malaria. So what the British did was pack up every summer and head for the hills. Which is where I'm going, on this tiny bonkers steam train, which somehow, if it doesn't run out of coal, is going to chuff its way up to Darjeeling, 7,000 feet above the clouds. It used to take 3 days for the Mem Saab to get to Darjeeling from Calcutta. But a brilliant railway engineer, an Englishman called Franklin Prestage, working in eastern Bengal, had the idea for this tiny 2-foot gauge track. And in 1881, the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway Company was in business. The engine was built in Manchester, can I just say that? And unlike most British train journeys where you're looking at people's back gardens and bizarre choice of conservatory, on this train you can practically lean out and do your shopping.
Everywhere the train goes past, people are just doing this to get all the bits out of their hair. It's the dirtiest coal. It's so weird to go up a train track in the middle of somebody's high street. So this train, God willing, will go to Darjeeling, which is where all the British ladies used to come in the days of the Empire to get away from the heat. So although it feels quite warm, it's nothing compared to what it is down below. It's really interesting to come through this little town because it's how I imagine towns in England would have been about 100 years ago, with people sitting about, people chatting, and lots of hustle and bustle and lots of shops. And there's a really nice atmosphere here. There's a lot of energy and purposefulness. I might be able to marry somebody here, actually. That would be quite good. All the men seem really friendly, all waving at me. I might take one home. Oh, look, he's running along the train now. The man that just waved at me. We're above the clouds. We're actually above the clouds.
It's only the second railway in the world to become a World Heritage Site, but it isn't just for tourists, it's a proper working railway. It comes up once a day and everyone seems pleased to see it. They wave and smile and brush bits of burning cinder off their heads. I love it. The engine is called the Bluebird, made in Manchester. Can I just say that again? This has got to count in our favour, hasn't it? This railway? One tiny tick in the benefits of empire column. This must have made their lives a little bit easier. The gradient is so steep, just nipping to the shop for them is like us going up a loft ladder. They must have the biggest calf muscles in the world. That may be why they're so keen on the sari. It's a spectacular ride. The train never goes through a cutting or into a tunnel because Franklin Prestage didn't want the passengers ever to lose sight of the view. And it is a big old view. It's a bit stomach-dropping, actually. I'm glad I'm in the train and not anywhere near the edge.
You wouldn't believe a train could get up here. It's the most balmy thing.
Darjeeling wasn't really a place before the British came. These hill stations are a sort of Victorian invention. And in those times, it wasn't just about escaping the heat. It was really about trying to forget you lived in India. You had your nice villas and your churches, none of those nasty temples, and the only Indians you'd have to bother with would be the ones doing your washing or bringing you your gin and tonic. So, although Darjeeling wasn't home, with its nice fresh air and familiar-looking buildings, it was as good as. And if if you kept your eyes on your teapot and didn't look too closely at the Himalayas, you could almost be in Buxton.
This is all about white is the new black as far as tea is concerned. And they're saying that it might be good if they start harvesting white tea in Darjeeling as well as black tea and green tea, because they think there's going to be a worldwide boom in white tea. I think it's got some health benefits, a bit like green tea. I'm not sure because I can't be bothered to read it all. It says it's perfect for a quiet evening. I'm not sure that's such a fantastic selling point.
White tea? How will that work? Everyone knows tea's brown, milk and 2 sugars. It's our heritage. We had the sugar first. That was cheap because it came from Jamaica. We had nothing to put it into, so we invented the cup of tea. We started to grow tea. Nice brown English tea, you know. Indian tea from China. You see, the first governor of Darjeeling, Dr. Campbell, planted some Chinese tea seeds in his garden here as an experiment in 1835. And now look. You'll never get the mower through that. This is Raja, and this is his tea plantation, which is all organic and has been in his family since 1859.
You know, these plants are from Victorian times.
Oh, these ones?
Yeah, these ones. They were planted out in 1842, being uprooted from the Chinese tea fields of Hungxiang.
So does tea not come from India then? Does it
No,
all
not
come
at all,
from
not at
China?
all. This is Camellia sinensis, and it was brought along in 1840s when tea drinking became extremely popular in Victorian England.
But Darjeeling's not China tea, is it?
Of course it is. The seeds are all originally China seeds, but what Darjeeling is to tea, Champagne is to wine. So the Chinese lost out, and Darjeeling prospered.
Who owned the plantations?
Most of the plantations are all British-owned, and the investment was all from London. It grew very rapidly. But most of the managers were not English. They were Scottish. So you'll see some wonderful names like Glenburn, Maggie's Hope, Bannockburn, and stuff like that, okay? And these men were quite incredible. Just imagine there were no roads or communication at all. They got these huge machines, the dryers, the stokers, withering tats, etc. The engines weighing 3 or 4 tons and carrying them up the steep mountain hillsides and then taking them down to 4 or 5 kilometers down and there was nothing at all. How did they do it? I don't think anybody could do it now.
No.
You know, under those conditions.
So you admire that?
Oh, that was amazing. I wonder where that has gone these days. I wonder.
And who was working on the plantation?
Nepalese people were brought in, and of course at that time, everybody says, you know, it was very exploitive, etc., but it was the only organized farmlands. And people were treated the best in those times. They had organized medical health, insurance, regular wages, rations, etc., which was not to be found anywhere else in the world. And people conveniently tend to forget all that in retrospect.
So you don't think it was a bad thing?
Oh, it was wonderful. I think that, well, I wouldn't be here if the British hadn't been here.
They call Darjeeling tea the champagne of teas, and there are 3 basic varieties. It's harvested at 3 different times in the year, but the first flush, harvested in mid-March after the spring rains, has the most delicate flavour. They bring the green leaves in and they spread them out to get out the moisture. And then they roll the leaves, and that's to bruise them so the sap is exposed to the oxygen. The leaves are fermented, dried out and then graded. A whole leaf tea would be a top grade, and the teeny bits that fall through to the bottom end up in tea bags, which I don't think Raja would ever serve.
Victoria, hope
Thank
you enjoy
you.
the world's best tea.
The world's best tea.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So this is Darjeeling Silver Tips.
Silver Tips, which
Yes.
has the world record price of $400 per kilo. We shall wait for your opinion.
It's very subtle.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful.
It's an extremely delicate tea and has 4 layers of flavors, actually. And as you roll it along and sip it along gently, the flavors unfold. I normally drink it last thing at night to lull me into celestial slumber, actually.
Oh, well, let's hope it doesn't have that effect now.
How lovely to be sitting at the top of the world, drinking Indian tea from china cups in an organic garden, with Raja and his wife Swarupa telling me all about life in the days of the Raj.
So the British planters were complete lords of Darjeeling. Now, they, of course, they strayed a lot. So there were a lot of fallout, illegitimate children out of that.
What, they strayed with local people?
Of course, the community. Because particularly the young...
Especially the men.
No, the assistant managers were not allowed to get married for 14 years.
Why? So they could concentrate on
On
tea?
their work,
Yes.
And the ladies would just come up in the summer or in October, you see.
Oh, I
so they
see.
were left to themselves over here alone. It's quite a lonely
Oh, well,
life and a tough life.
that's asking for
I
trouble.
mean, so what do you do?
And can you recognise people now? Can you think, oh,
Yes.
they must have had white
Right.
parents?
Obviously,
By
that's
looking at them,
quite
you can make out
apparent.
the-
It's quite
yeah, you
apparent.
can
They're
make-
not-
No, we haven't speeded the film up. That's how married people talk.
Yeah.
It's accepted.
It's a funny old place, Darjeeling. Piled up all higgledy-piggledy on the hillside, with just the odd reminder of the old days here and there. It does feel completely different from Calcutta. It's cool and fresh, but it's cold at night. I've got a very scary-looking electric fire in my hotel room. I think it might have belonged to Gandhi. They're missing a trick here with their derelict churches. They've not heard of the concept of the discount carpet warehouse. People come here now for trekking and river rafting. There's not much left of the old British Darjeeling, and what there is needs a bit of a facelift. That roof alone is going to take months, especially if all you've got is a brush. While all that lovely tea was headed west to a Great Britain where the kettle was always on and only a nice cuppa would kickstart the day, an even more addictive and less cosy substance was leaving India and heading east to the opium dens of China. And that's how we got Hong Kong, or, as I thought it was called as a child, Made in Hong Kong. We won this little island in a fight, and not really a fair fight either. You know, I said we didn't arrive in India with guns blazing. Well, in Hong Kong we did. Britain had a problem trying to trade with China because there was nothing of ours that they wanted. But the climate that was so good for growing tea was perfect for growing opium, and that was something the Chinese couldn't get enough of. There were so many addicts, and it's such a socially damaging habit, that the Emperor of China banned trading in opium altogether. It was illegal. But it was too profitable for the British to give up, and they ignored the ban. A small standoff escalated into a war when Britain sent in the warships that China didn't have. The Navy took Hong Kong, and it was given to the British a year later, to be possessed in perpetuity by Her Britannic Majesty. This was the place to live if you were a British merchant, a taipan. At the very top of the island, Victoria Peak. You could stroll out of your palace with its flags flying and be driven down to your offices on the waterfront.
I've noticed two things really coming straight from Calcutta to Hong Kong. One is that although Calcutta seems very chaotic and crowded and noisy, you think there would be repetitive strain injury from honking the horns the whole time, it's actually very calm, tolerant atmosphere. It's actually quite a spiritual city, whereas here, first impression is that it's all about money and trade and acquisition and display and shopping. And the other obvious thing is that in Calcutta, everything happens on the street. They're all living, washing, eating, cooking, doing the laundry, all happening on the street. Whereas here, nothing much goes on at street level. It's all up, off the street and closed in these really, really tall buildings.
I've been lucky enough to spend a bit of time with someone who lives in one of these high buildings. She's called Lammy. She's been going around Hong Kong with me. She's lived here all her life. I wanted to know what she thought the typical Hong Kong person was like.
We're very hardworking,
Yeah,
very material,
yeah,
very optimistic,
yeah.
and we always look forward instead of looking backward.
I'm looking around, I can't see any old buildings. There are no old buildings left in Hong Kong.
Well, in Hong Kong, we're not as sentimental
Right.
as the West
Yeah.
are. New is good and new is modern. It just means better.
And is it better to have more money?
To have money is like an essential element.
Healesville Sanctuary in southern Australia. Much of what we know about platypus mating and breeding has been learned by Les Fisk and his colleagues.
Really enjoy is helping people achieve.
You know, we